Hi, my name's Katie. Today I'm going to discuss first the impact that someone's environment can have on a person, on their mental, physical, and well being. And then I'm going to go into a personal example of stuff from my past that has had an influence on my well being throughout the years. So, first, when I think about environmental influences on someone's well being, I think about when I worked at Res Care and we received referrals from the Department of Child Services. So when I worked there, we had to go to a seminar where we learned about ACEs. So ACEs are Adverse Childhood Experiences. And ACEs is basically set up to make a test that has several questions about someone's childhood. So, some of the questions pertain to experiencing discrimination or racism in early childhood, watching a parent or sibling be abused, being abused themselves, whether it's physically, mentally, or sexually, or even just having your parent go to jail while you're a young child, or being separated from your parents, like by DCS or anything like that, is generally considered an ACE. Um, So after you take this test about how many ACEs you have, they tally them all up, and the findings of this study were that those who had 6 or more ACEs were um, more likely to have a lower life expectancy of 20 years, which is crazy. And those compared to those who had less than 6 ACEs. The reason they believe that this happens is because the fight or flight part of your brain, the amygdala, is constantly firing. The example that our presenter gave is that when you see a bear, your eyes widen, your lungs expand, your body's getting ready to either fight or flight. And that's healthy and that's good and it's an adaptive. But what happens when you go home to the bear every night? These children have these just constant experiences and their body just doesn't know what to do with all of it. So they're more likely to have weakened immune systems, heart problems, addiction tendencies, and anxiety. So, similarly, in Chapter 9 of Lesser and Pope, we talked about attachment disorders, several of them, that can be formed in early stages of development. Whenever I think about detachment disorders, I think about my intro to psychology class, where we learned about Jeannie. So, Jeannie was born in 1957, and she was the victim of severe abuse, neglect, and social isolation. So from ages 20 months to 13 years and 7 months, she was locked alone by her father in her room. And when she was in that room, she was either strapped to a toilet or bound down into a crib so that she had no mobility at all. So like her arms or her legs, all of it was bound. She was eventually discovered and saved from that environment, but due to her lack of proper socialization and her abusive, hostile environment, the people who found her described her as feral. That's an extreme example of what can happen from a negative childhood, but I know a lot of the research that was done in psychology was based off of being able to work with Jeannie and help Jeannie. So next I want to talk about my personal experiences. So I'm going to put it into 4 categories just to kind of make sense of it, because I think that as you go down the categories, they all influence each other and show the influences of my experience and how they changed me as a person. So in early childhood, at 3 years old, my parents were divorced. I don't really have a lot of memories of the actual divorce. I was 3, but I do have very vivid memories of things that happened after the divorce. So I remember finding a picture of Mickey Mouse flipping off the screen, and I guess it was in a manila folder, and he just sent a big picture of it to my mom. And I remember I saw like Mickey's ears or something, so I pulled it out and looked at it, and I was confused. And then I felt like I saw something wrong. I also remember when I was at my dad's, he would mock my mom, or he would create this false narrative that she made me throw away all the toys he bought. And I distinctly remember being like, that's not true, because I was a big fan of my mom. I still am. So I was always defending her to him. So around my middle part of my childhood, was the last time that I ever saw my father. So while I was at my dad's, my stepmom said some pretty inappropriate things to me about my mom's past. And I also found a whole lot of pot being grown in my dad's house. So I asked my mom not to make me go back, and she didn't. So around adolescence, my mom was engaged to this man who I hated, and he ended up stealing a lot of things, a lot of money from her. And I remember having nightmares about coming home and finding his truck being in the driveway again. So I think that that was a little bit of a trauma for me. Later in my adolescence, my dad tried to be a part of my life again. But what happened there was I wanted to go to Barbados instead of stay with him, and he got mad. And so he left me a voicemail saying he was disowning me, he was done with me. And then even later in my adolescence, he actually came to my hometown and emancipated me, but refused to actually see me in my hometown. And I distinctly remember having the interview with the judge and knowing deep down that that was ending the relationship with my father. So my late adolescence, I think that all the things previously in my childhood led to what happened in my late adolescence. I was in an extremely abusive relationship, and I had a lot of issues trusting and relating with men. It took me about 4 years after getting out of that relationship to be able to understand that everything that had happened and understand why I felt the way I felt. I'm now engaged and in a really healthy relationship, but it took kind of looking to the past to be able to get to that point. Thank you.